Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be discussing the best and worst case scenarios for each Lions rookie this upcoming season. Then at the end of this video, I'm going to rank them based upon year one impact. Before we get into this video, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Let's first talk about offensive tackle Blake Miller. When we look at Blake Miller, first of all, he has to win the starting job. I don't think this is necessarily a guarantee. I think he would be considered the favorite for the job, but we do have a competent right tackle in Larry Borom. This is a guy that's been in the league for a while now. It's going to be a little bit of a competition. I think Blake Miller will win it, but best case scenario starts there. Then, at the very best, I think he only gives up a few sacks and is a beast in the run game. I'm not going to sit here and predict a rookie offensive tackle to give up 0 sacks. There's only a few tackles in the league at most that only give up 0 sacks. But Blake Miller, let's just say he gives up 2, 3, 4 sacks. That would be a great season for a rookie offensive tackle. Another big thing and a way he can reach his best case scenario is he has to stay healthy. The Lions aren't really used to that, honestly. Across from Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker has constantly been injured. He's missed at least 2 games in the past 3 years. So if Blake Miller can have a full, healthy season, that would be huge for him and his chance to reach his ceiling this season. Now, when we look at the worst-case scenario, I would say it would start with him not starting or starting later into the year, maybe not even starting at all. That would obviously mean Larry Borom would have a great season, and that would be a great signing. But we would like him to start, especially since we just spent a first-round pick on him. Now, the one thing that I didn't love in his film, sometimes at least he would give up pressure or give up a sack on a bull rush. Players that are bigger and more physical than him, that's probably where I would think he would struggle. If that translated to the NFL, that's where his worst-case scenario could start. It could also start with, false start penalties, things like that, mental errors where he's trying to get ahead of the play. That can happen as tackles translate from college to the NFL. Now, if any of these things happened, it would not mean he's a bust. It would just be, it's only year one, but it wouldn't be the best start to his career. But then when we look into my prediction, I'm very confident in Blake Miller. I love the pick. I gave it an A grade. Blake Miller was one of my favorite tackles in this year's class. We got him at 17. I loved the pick. But my prediction is that he steps in and looks like he's going to be a long-term starter for the Lions. I think he's going to have a very solid season. I'm very excited to see what Blake Miller can do. Next, let's talk about Derek Moore. When you look at Derek Moore, I think his best case scenario starts with also starting. He's going to be in competition with DJ Wonnum. We obviously know Aiden Hutchinson is going to start, but who's going to be the starter across from him in week 1? We do not know. Derek Moore, even if he becomes the edge 2 at some point, gets over 50% of the snaps, is constantly doing that, I think that would be best case scenario for him. And if he can prove that he can be the edge 2 that the Lions and Detroit we've been looking for a while now, that would be huge. I'm going to say his ceiling, his best case scenario week 1 or year 1 is to reach 10 sacks and be a good run defender. Double-digit sacks would be huge across Aiden Hutchinson. We don't really see that a lot. Yes, we had Al-Qadim Muhammad do that this past season, but that was kind of a fake 10 sacks. Let's be real. He had some – I'm not going to say he was awful, but he had some big games where he had like three sacks in them, just beating up on, opposite tackles that just aren't great. But side note there, most betting and analyst projections I've seen have Derek Moore at around like 3 to 6 sacks. So if he can be above that range at all, that would be reaching a good ceiling for him. Now, when you look at the worst case scenario, I would say that it starts with him never being a real contributor, at any point during the season. Is he going to be that just a third down pass rush piece? That would be pretty disappointing for a second round pick, but that would just be the worst case scenario. Now, when we look into my prediction, I do think DJ Wonnum starts week 1 because he's that veteran guy that's proven his experience in the NFL. But I think Derek Moore starts to get over 50% of the snaps about halfway through the season. I believe in Derek Moore. I like the prospect. I think he could have a very solid season. I'm projecting 7 sacks, and I would be very happy with that, and I think he would as well. I think he is one of the biggest opportunities on this team out of all of the rookies. We have needed some pass rush help for a while now. It's a role that's wide open, and if he can come in and fill that role, it would be huge for the Lions. Next, let's talk about Jimmy Rolder. I think for Jimmy, his best case scenario starts on special teams. If he could come in and be one of the best special teamers, be a core special teamer for the Lions, that would be huge. If he could, maybe push to be a Pro Bowl special teamer, oftentimes your depth linebackers are some of your best guys in that area. And if he can be that, that would be huge for the Lions. I also think to reach his best case scenario would be him turning into the linebacker 3. I think Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes are kind of locked into the first 2 roles, but the competition for LB3 between him and Rodrigo is going to be a real one. Even if he doesn't start over Rodrigo at all, if he can just be a guy that's reliable depth, be the first linebacker to come in and be a stud on special teams, that would be a great season for him. Now, when you look into the worst case scenario, I think it would be him not being as much of a dog as we think he's going to be on special teams. He's going to be out there. We know that, but is he going to be one of the leading tacklers in that area? We'll just have to wait and see. Now, another reason that he could, have a bad season would be bad, but he's still a rookie, just never getting snaps on defense, real true snaps, stays the linebacker 4 and doesn't really rotate in ever. That would not be ideal for him. But when we look into my prediction, I think he's going to come in and immediately be a good special teams piece. I think he's going to be one of our best special teamers. I think he's going to rotate in on defense, make some big plays, maybe get a few interceptions. We saw that in camp, maybe pick up a fumble or 2. I think this is the guy that's going to be the first guy to check in at the linebacker position. If there's ever an injury to the top 3 guys, I think he's going to be prepared to take that starting role after this season concludes. I'm very high on Jimmy Rolder. Next, let's talk about my favorite draft pick, Keith Abney. When we look into Keith Abney, this was the guy I was been okay with the Lions taking in the 2nd round. We ended up getting him in the 5th round. My favorite pick because it was just simply such a steal. But his best case scenario this season, I think, is winning the slot corner competition or on the outside, wherever the Lions are going to have him take reps at. If he can win one of those roles at any point during this season, that would be huge for him and his career outlook. I think he's a guy that's going to come in and compete for that slot role with Roger McCreary. I really do. And now with the whole Terrion Arnold situation, we're a little bit weaker on the outside at corner. I think he's going to be valuable depth out there. Likely not going to start out there because of his size and that translation to the NFL. But I'm very high on Keith Abney and what he can do. Then when you look at the worst case scenario, it would be once again his size becoming an issue in the NFL. He gets a little too grabby on deep routes. So if he's covering bigger wide receivers, faster wide receivers, is he going to do that? Or is he going to just trust his play, which I think he needs to do a little bit more. Just his worst case scenario would be him never really becoming a starter, him never really getting real defensive snaps this season and just kind of playing special teams and never really just cracks the rotation. But when we look into my prediction, I think he's going to end up starting at some point during the season, whether it's on the inside or the outside. More than likely, it's going to be on the inside on the slot prediction. I'm not going to sit here and predict that he's going to steal the starting role right away, week 1, but I am going to predict that at some point that he's going to start in this secondary, and that would be good for a 5th-round pick. I think he's going to prove that he's a clear fit within this defense this season, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to do going forward. Next, let's talk about rookie Kendrick Law. This one shouldn't take too long, as unfortunately he suffered a season-ending ACL injury. Hopefully next year he can come back, be a special teams gunner, which a lot of people think he's going to be, and be that offensive gadget piece that I was really hoping he was going to be for the Lions this season. I'm excited to see what he can do. I know he's elusive when the ball's in his hand, so hopefully Kendrick Law can come back. I'm praying for you. Come back and be healthy and ready to go going into that 2027 season. Let's talk about Skylar Gill-Howard. I think his best case scenario starts with him being just a rotational defensive tackle. This would be very good for a 6th-round pick. If he can come in and crack the rotation at any point this season, that's reaching the best case scenario for him, in my opinion. I think he would have to kind of play that designated pass rush role from the interior, 3rd and longs. Is that going to be the guy that comes in and hopefully can rack up a couple sacks this season? Maybe. Who's going to play that role? We don't know. We know there's a guy like Mekhi Wingo. Is that going to be Skylar Gill-Howard, or is it going to be him, Chris Smith, anyone like that? We'll see who that piece is going to be. I think he could easily prove that he belongs on the roster, and that simply enough would be good as a 6th-round pick. Now, when you look into the worst case scenario, I don't really see a world in which he does not make the team. We just made my depth chart predictions. I called him a lock. I really like Skylar Howard. He's a 6th-round pick, one that I think the Lions might value a little bit more than the guy that we're about to talk about. But the worst case scenario is that he never really gets real valuable snaps. He's just, often a guy that's, not really brought up to the active roster. He's not really an option on game day. Doesn't give the Lions too much this season. I think the reasons for that would maybe him not being physically big enough, playing big enough. That would be the main reasons that he would have a worst case scenario type of season. But when you look into my prediction, I think this is a guy that's going to come in and at some point during the season give some rotational snaps, and I think that would be a win for him. I think he's going to have a very solid year, prove that he can stay on the roster, at least fight to stay on the roster. If he's inactive some weeks at the beginning of the season, don't panic. It's a guy that might take some time, but once he gets going, I believe in Skylar Howard, a late-round pick here. When you look at Tyree West and his best case scenario, I think it's simply just him making the 53-man roster. There's a lot of guys that play his position, play a lot like him, kind of that 4-eye role. Levi Onwuzurike, Tyler Lacey, guys that have been with the Lions. If he can even make the team as a 7th-round pick, that would be pretty impressive. And the best case scenario for me, he would maybe get a few snaps a game at most, in my opinion. But even if he just makes it, earn some trust in practice, starts to build that role, try to crack the rotation going into the 2027 season, I think that would be good as a 7th-round pick. Now, when you look at the worst case scenario, it starts with him not making the team. We have a very crowded defensive line, one that I just talked about a lot in my depth chart breakdown. The defensive line, there's a lot of guys, the most at that position group. We'll see if he can crack or even make the team, really. But he doesn't really. The other reason that he would have a worst case scenario type of season is he just doesn't prove anything during training camp, and the Lions just don't really feel the need to bring him back. A lot of times teams in the NFL don't really give these later round option guys time to develop. They have to prove it year 1 or year 2, or else they are gone. And I think that could potentially be the situation with Tyree West. My prediction is that he ends up getting cut. We talked about this. I just don't really believe that we can keep this many defensive linemen, especially one that we just took in the 7th round when we have this many guys on the roster. But if the Lions, I'm going to predict that they do bring him back on the practice squad, try to see what he has during the preseason, things like that. But this is a rookie that I kind of have low expectations for, but we'll see if he can prove me wrong. Finally, let's take a look into the ranking the rookies by biggest impact in year 1. So the start of this list was relatively easy. Blake Miller and Derek Moore were going to be the clear guys for 1 and 2 spots. They come in, they were our first 2 draft picks, and they fill the 2 biggest positions of need. I think Blake Miller has a better chance to start week 1 than Derek Moore does, so I'm going to put him at 1, Derek Moore at 2. Then the 3 and 4 spot, that was the only one that, I really had to sit down and think about. I ended up going with Keith Abney, my guy, over Jimmy Rolder. I just think Keith Abney can come in. I think he could potentially start week 1, where Jimmy Rolder is likely going to be behind Malcolm Rodriguez to start. That secondary, there's a lot going on. It often stays banged up. So I think Keith Abney could make the bigger impact during year 1. Then 5 and 6, these were pretty set, pretty clear at the bottom. Now, it was pretty clear that I was going to have Skylar Howard over Tyree West because I just think what he can be, is he going to come in and be what we drafted Mekhi Wingo to be, fill that role, be an interior pass rush piece to come in on later downs? I think he can do so. Tyree West, it's going to be a little bit harder for him to make the team with a lot of guys that play a lot like him. And then you see at the bottom, unfortunately, Kendrick Law is injured and out for the year with his ACL injury. But overall, this is the way that I look at the class. It does not need to, every single player need to come in and be a star. But if Blake Miller can be a starter, Derek Moore can give us some pass rush help, and, maybe 1 or 2 of these day 3 guys can come in and make an impact. That's a successful rookie class, a successful year 1 for me, in my opinion. But that'll be it for today's edition of Lions Roundtable. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, peace.